Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Okay, so I think all of you have been here for a day long before. We usually have this nice fluffy format where we talk about suffering in the morning, and then we have lunch, and we're tired and we're kind of suited out, and we talk about the freedom from suffering. We say, okay, the first noble truths, we're going to keep those in the morning when we got tons of energy, and then in the afternoon we're just going to open it up and we're going to breathe, and we're going to feel freedom, and we're going to let all that suffering go and be by the wayside. And it's worked for a lot of things. We've talked about craving, we've talked about self-view, we've talked about all these different things, papancha. And the curious, interesting thing about disenchantment is it's really always good. You know, so we kind of started with the good, yeah. Disenchantment is really right there before enlightenment. It's right there before the work is done. Basically, disenchantment is kind of the culmination of us developing stability of mind and then looking at things appropriately, wisely. So then how do we get better than that? Like, how do we talk about that? What's after that? Well, actually, not much. Actually, if we're going to be responsible, it's just more of like, how do we stabilize this idea of disenchantment so that we know what it is we're cultivating? Yeah. And the thing is, in all the things we looked at in the morning, it's just even though I summarized like vast parts of the Pali canon and said, oh yeah, this is here, you'll see it in this way, and this is here, you'll see it in this way. It's just not even scratching the surface. Just enchantment has been there for all of our favorite suttas. It's like Ananda, you know, in the background, just, you know, just taking things in. Disenchantment was there for all the good stuff. And we might not have even noticed. Sometimes it only showed up once in a list of like 15 things. But it was there. It was there and it was important. And in some ways, it's so ubiquitous, it's so prevalent, we might not realize that it is really this essential, like this really important culminating aspect of the path, that if we're doing things right, we get disenchantment. If we're not doing things right, we will not get disenchantment. Yeah. And this is also the thing, is saying, I do think this is an experience, it maybe comes and goes for us during our practice. Like sometimes we'll be practicing and we'll just have this, I don't even know really how to describe it, this almost melancholy sort of sense of, yeah, samsara sucks. And I don't want to be reborn. And it's just not worth it. And I could really, if I never had another piece of cake, I think I could be okay. Yeah. And it will have these thoughts and we'll be like, what is this? And the answer is disenchantment, because it's the reason, it is right there before enlightenment. So it's like when we have these thoughts that just don't find their place within the stream of consciousness of a normal worldly person, we can know these are noble thoughts. These are thoughts of freedom. These fall outside of, well, what am I going to do tomorrow? It's like, oh, where am I going to go on vacation next month? It is like, no, you're having a thought of all vacations are suffering. It's like, there's no box for that. There's no place to put that, you know, and it's not going to be every time you think about, you know, visiting a foreign country, you're going to be like, they're not going to speak my language. You're not going to always look on the downside. Sometimes you're going to be like, wow, I could really use a beach right now. I could really, just hear something, some foreign music, or see some pretty colors and be happy. But when they do arise, we can know it's like, oh, okay, something I've been doing has led to this. And moreover, once we get a feeling for that and where it shows up and how it comes about, we start to realize it's not an accident. When this feeling of disenchantment does come up, often there's no, like many insights, there's no immediate causal link. We're not thinking like, may I not be reborn? May I not be reborn? May I not be reborn? And then 3 minutes later, we have the thought, I never want to be reborn again. This is awful. It doesn't work like that. It might happen like 3 months later where we're thinking like, oh, I got this feeling in I might have cancer. It's like, oh, I don't want to do this again. I should meditate. And there's no obvious connection, but nevertheless, this is how causality works. We would not have had a sort of thought of complete, just being okay and disinterested and disenchanted and done with something if we hadn't done the work of kind of looking at it and kind of considering it and looking at it in a balanced way. So this morning, we just picked one thing, right? And, that was the suggestion, is like, can we experience some amount of true disenchantment towards one thing? And I think it's meant to be really accessible. It's meant to be like, almost like, well, there's no way this could work. So I don't have to worry about getting it right or wrong. And it's like, I'll just do it. And it's like, you're right. Voting. Like everybody says voting is so important, but when I think about it, it's like, I don't like politicians, so I lose every time. And it's like, oh wow, okay. And you're just writing it down. It's like, I think I don't care about voting. And then you look at it and you're like, yeah, but I've still got this nagging voice in the back of my mind that says, oh, you should care. And so let's talk about this, huh? Let's address you. Like, why do you think I should care so much? Why do you think it's so important that I care? Like, I have so much invested in caring about this. And then it starts to, and you start to be like, well, you know that there's suffering, right? You know that there's always going to be suffering. It's like, well, sometimes it might work out. No, really? And you have this little dialogue with it. And then what starts to arise, or you start to realize, well, like the suffering that arises in connection with this one thing, with voting, is there every time you vote. It's not just that one time where there's that one candidate, it's all the time. And so what you're looking for is the universal characteristics of suffering that you can rely on, that are reliably arising every single time that thing comes up. Once you break through to those, you really have some ammunition. Yeah. Now, if it was just one thing, we would still be able to broad brush, be able to erase whole sections of samsara from our list of things that could possibly make us miserable, right? If it was just voting, wow. I mean, that's all anybody talks about anymore. We would be free of all news. Basically, we could just turn the news channels off because they're always talking about voting. And we're like, wow, I got over that one little thing. And suddenly a huge section of samsara is now free and clear. Well, I mean, yes, but we might find that there's still plenty of sections of samsara that are left to be demined, and we could get to work. So what the Buddha says in a lot of suttas is he's kind of pointing us in the right direction. He's like, well, if you were to just like narrow your focus a bit and like take on some categories that are all inclusive, you might find that you have a lot less work, right? Rather than thinking of voting and thinking of chocolate cake and thinking of cats and thinking of like shoes and thinking of, skiing, and like, rather than taking all of the things that you've ever possibly been attached to, you could take form, you could take feelings, you could take memories, you could take habit patterns, you could take consciousness arising and ceasing. And so the Buddha says, look at the five aggregates, yeah? And look at form and say, is there ever a form that is always there, that doesn't break down? Have you ever met a form that doesn't break down? No, but maybe there is one out there somewhere, and it's perfect and beautiful and it never makes us suffer. What? If I've never seen it, do I really think it exists? It could. No, maybe not. Maybe I would like to believe that, but maybe that very desire to believe that is the one thing holding me back from accepting the reality that no, there is no happy, permanent, unchanging, satisfying form. And I said it's like Ajahn Punadamo is a very funny monk who lives up in Ontario, Canada. He once said that he read in some deep esoteric Tibetan manual that they'd actually had this line of philosophy going where if there was a completely unchanging, permanently satisfying form in the universe would implode. Because as soon as a consciousness landed on that object, it would refuse to leave. Because why would it leave? It's permanently satisfying. And so it would be like a black hole for consciousness. Anytime a consciousness landed on that, it would refuse to leave. And gradually all consciousness in the universe would converge on that point, and it would just all collapse. And it's like, that's a very, that's a very like, wow, I mean, that's what you get for living on top of a mountain where the oxygen is very thin. You think very, very wild thoughts. Yeah, but that's also right in line with what the Buddha was saying, right? This is absurd, this little voice in our head. Yeah, so why not look at all form and say, rather than looking at what I would like form to be, why don't I just make a list of all the things that I have seen exist for all form? And how about when I approach a form, this is what I remember. Like, okay, there's this form, there's this house, there's this car, there's this cat, there's this shoe, there's this anything. And it is impermanent. It is not going to be this way forever. And, if it's a cat, it's going to run off. If it's a car, it's going to rust. If it's a shoe, it's going to get dirty. It's like, it might not even be that way for very long. Yeah. But because we've already been like, oh, this is just a form. I know forms. I'm disenchanted with forms. I don't take them seriously. Yeah. They're not permanent. They're not stable. They're not reliable. And then you like your shoulder, gets dislocated and you're like, wow, this is really painful. And then they put it back in and like, wow, you were so relaxed. So like, why were you so relaxed? That was so painful. It's like, weren't you worried? And it was like, well, no, it's form. I mean, why would I mean, this is what happens. Shoulders do this. Why would I be shocked? And then people don't know what to make of you. Somebody's like, brushing their hair and it's like, oh, it's getting dry. I think I need a new shampoo. And you're like, oh, you can shave it off. That would solve your problem too. And they're like, what's heavy? Right? It's hot. Isn't it hot? I don't know. It doesn't seem like something to be attached to me. And the people are like, wow, what is going on in your head? And you're like, well, nothing. I don't make a thing out of it, right? And so we can do the same thing with our preferences, right? The things that bring us pleasure. We're like, okay, yeah, that's a pleasant feeling. Or okay, that's an unpleasant feeling, yeah? But we can know of all pleasant feelings that they are impermanent. And we can know about all unpleasant feelings, like, wow, oh, right. And I do, I have an unpleasant feeling in my back today. I've got a pinched nerve. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, yeah, that's unpleasant. Yeah, okay. And then I go back to doing what I was doing. It's not a surprise. Like, it was there when I woke up. It's still there. Should I be surprised? No, just because I forgot about it for a minute doesn't mean it went away. but it's not going to be there tomorrow. Or if it is, it's not going to be there a week from now. Or if it is, maybe it's going to be there until I die, but then it'll go. It's not going to be there after that. And if it is, it won't be my problem. So these are the basic categories we've got. And we can maybe look at a few quick ones. So let me share the screen. Okay, yeah. So we have the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, which is SN 22.59, one of the cardinal suttas, one of the, it's literally like a compass point, cardinal direction sutta. And there it is, like the 59th sutta in the 22nd chapter of the Samyutta Nikaya. But this is what we got. But here towards the end, the Buddha says exactly, he says very succinctly and very beautifully and very clearly and without ambiguity what I took 20 minutes saying. He's saying, you truly see any kind of consciousness at all, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, far or near, all consciousness with right understanding. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. Yeah. And this is where we find our Nibbidā, right? Nibbidā. And there it was. It was there the whole time. So seeing this, a learned, an instructed, a wise, noble disciple grows disenchanted with form, with feeling, with perception, with choices, and with consciousness. And being disenchanted, their desire fades away. When their desire fades away, they're freed. When they're freed, they know that they're freed and they understand rebirth is ended, the spiritual journey has been completed, what had to be done has been done, there is no return to any state of existence. Yeah, so this is one structure where the Buddha says, we take form and we take feeling and we take perception and we take sankharas and we take consciousness and we apply these characteristics universally, whether it is in the past or in the future, in the present, whether it's internal or external, whether it is coarse or subtle, whether it is inferior and worldly or superior, whether it is far away or it is near. We can know that it doesn't really matter. And once we know that it doesn't really matter, that they're all going to kind of bear this characteristic, then we already know in advance there's nothing to get excited about. And this is where that quality of disenchantment, like the word Nibbidā, really using, kind of co-opting the verb for finding, it works the same way in English. There is finding as the end point of seeking, like we looked for something and then we found it. But there's also finding that we weren't looking for. Like we just happened upon, a $5 bill that, oh, look at that. We just found it. We weren't looking for it, but there it is. And in the same way, Nibbidā, disenchantment, works in both cases. This is, the craving has ceased. So we're not experiencing a seeking, but our consciousness, because it's not seeking, we're finding a place of stability, internal happiness, and really confidence. Like I don't need to seek. And even if something is presented to me, it's like, oh, look, that's a $5 bill. Well, I'm a monk. I don't use money. And it was like, I'm just going to walk away. And if somebody asks, is that your $5 bill? And I'd be like, nope, not mine. You can do what you want with it. Yeah. Because I've already made my decisions about it. Yeah. Just like, wow, this is okay. No problem to be had there. And we can apply that. And once we've applied that, then we don't even need to go out and look at that form and look at that form and look at that form. We can literally just be here, present. And when a form presents itself to us, we can be like, you're impermanent. You're suffering. You're not self. And when the next one comes up, you're like, yep, you too. You're impermanent. You're suffering. You're not self. So this is the Anatalakkhana Sutta. And I looked up Adita Pariyaya Sutta, and apparently there's more than one. Go figure. The Buddha was talking about fire in a bunch of different cases. But, oh, this is really graphic. Oh, this is great. That's good. So, mendicants, I will teach you an exposition on burning. You'd be better off mutilating your eye faculty with a red-hot iron nail, burning, blazing, and glowing, than get caught up in the features and details in sights that can be known by the eye. For if you were to die at a time when your consciousness is still tied to gratification in those features or details, it's possible you'd go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. I speak having seen this drawback. And now I think most people who are familiar with the English language we'd be like, what? Well, that sounds very religious. And yeah, it is. Yeah, no worries. Like, you take it or leave it. But basically the Buddha is saying something very simple. And he's not even talking about you. He's not talking about you and the fact that, you know, you were looking at the new iPhone and thinking if it's time to upgrade. He wasn't talking about that. He's talking about the like immoral craving, right? You don't go to hell for like wanting a new iPhone. So don't worry about it. He was saying, but if you were to really like nurse and tie yourself to that object and say, I really, really want that, burning, blazing, glowing, full of lust and willing to break laws to get that thing, it's like that, then you should really be worried that you would die with that still in your mind, because that would be a dominant feature of your mind at the time of death, which would actually condition what next existence you might come to. Yeah. And that's what you get when you look up fire sermon. But anyway, this fire sermon, just like our Cardinal Sutta, the fire sermon, has this line regarding Nibbidā. Here we are again. Seeing this, a learned noble disciple grows disillusioned with the eye, disillusioned with visual sights, disillusioned with eye consciousness, and disillusioned with eye contact. And they become disillusioned with the painful, pleasant, or neutral feeling that arises conditioned by eye contact. Furthermore, they grow disillusioned with the ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, and their respective objects. Being disillusioned, their desire fades away. That's viraga. When desire fades away, they're freed. That's vimutti. When they're freed, they know I am freed. So we've got two different perspectives there about which package of characteristics we could take a look at. We could take a look at the five aggregates, or we could take a look at the sense bases and their objects. The end result is the same. It's that feeling of internal composure and security and confidence that you don't need these things. If they present themselves, you'll just know their characteristics, but if they're not presenting themselves, you're not going to go out looking for them, yeah? Because you already know their characteristics before they arise. Based on that, you become free of a whole layer of suffering. You don't seek out that layer of suffering, but should the qualities of that layer of suffering arise, you don't make them suffering. Yeah. You're presented with the same things that used to cause you to get stuck on views, or to get stuck on sensuality, or to get stuck on becoming, and it doesn't happen anymore. And so you're presented with the same situation, but the critical component, the personalized experience of suffering, is no longer there. So all you're dealing with is an event that will come and go. And when it's gone forever. You won't carry it with you. Now, if we find that views are an important sticking point for us, there's a really great sutta, the simile of the snake, and this is, if you can see it up here, it's a fairly long sutta. It's Majjhima Nikaya 22. And this is just, it's got a lot of great stuff in this one, but it starts out in a very interesting way, because there's a monk in the Sangha who is stuck on a view. And the other monks are trying to point out to him, it's like, look, getting stuck on views is going to stand in the way of any progress. It's the entry point. Yeah, if you can't get past views and you can't get past the adherence to views, then I mean, yeah, you can't go anywhere. This is the first level of enlightenment. You have to be able to deal with these. And he's like, no, I'm right, you're wrong. And so the Buddha calls him forward and says, look, no, you're wrong. And it doesn't even matter what view you got. Views are dumb. They're not worth, holding to. They're not worth suffering over for the rest of samsara. Yeah, they're worth letting go. And the Buddha uses this here. We're about 2/3 of the way through the sutta. The Buddha uses this argument right to this point. Yeah, and this is what we're saying, and this is the flavor of disenchantment. Yeah, the Buddha has already seen through views. So he's talking about views. It's not coming from aversion. It's not coming from, I think this, and so you should think this too. It's coming from like, look, I've seen the downside of these things. It just, you can take it or leave it, but this is my advice. And if you don't want to suffer, this is the perspective I think you should investigate. And he says, monks, it would make sense to be possessive about something that's permanent, everlasting, eternal, imperishable, and will last forever and ever. That's the Buddha saying the same thing, right? Look, if there was something permanent and satisfying, it's okay. You should be possessive about that thing. If you get it, you should keep it. But he says, but do you see any such possession? And the monks are like, no, Venerable Sir. And he's like, good, mendicants. I'm a Buddha, and I also don't see any such perfect, permanent, everlasting, eternal, imperishable, satisfying possession. And he said, it would make sense to grasp at any doctrine of self that didn't give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. But do you see any such doctrine? And they think for a minute, and they're like, no, Venerable Sir. He's like, good, monks. I cannot see any doctrine of self that does not give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. He said it would make sense to rely on a view, any view, that didn't give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. But do you see any such view that you can rely on? And the monks are like, well, no, Venerable Sir. It's like, good, monks. I'm a Buddha, and I can't see any view worth relying on. I don't see any view that does not give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Yeah? And he's not saying that they always do, but he's saying that is at all times, but he's saying that they always do. I mean, fundamentally, they will have this as their characteristic. Yeah? They're not going to always satisfy you. They're not going to always protect you. Sometimes they will be wrong. This is why you don't cling to views. Yeah? And the Buddha says, monks, were a self to exist, would there be a rational thought of this thing belongs to myself? He said, if you have a self, wouldn't it make sense that you could say, myself owns something? And they're like, yes, that makes sense. And he said, were there something that you knew you possessed? Would it make sense that you could say, therefore, I must exist? And they're like, yeah, okay, that kind of makes sense. You're losing me a little bit. Okay, kind of makes sense. And he said, but the Buddha says, but since a self and what belongs to a self are not actually found anywhere, is not the following a totally foolish teaching? The cosmos and the self are one and the same. After death, I will be permanent, everlasting, eternal, imperishable, and will last forever and ever. And the monks are like, well, when you put it that way, yes, it's kind of a foolish teaching. And so the Buddha goes, oh, okay, is form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? And we're like, well, it's suffering, sir. And if it's impermanent, suffering, and perishable, is it fit to be regarded thus? This is me, this is mine, this is myself. And they're like, no, Venerable Sir. He goes through the five aggregates. And then he's using this again and again and again. So therefore, you can know past, future, present, internal, external, coarse or fine. Seeing thus, learned noble disciple grows disillusioned with form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness. Yeah. So the things that we deal with and the ways that we deal with them have not changed. In 2,600 years, people are still getting caught on views. They're getting caught on slightly different views, but fundamentally they're still views. You know, our sensual desires, the things that we think are ours, our possessions, are attractive, are satisfying, they've changed quite a bit. We're no longer walking around with bare feet, and you know, it's dusty, and you know, we're our family members only own one shirt. We have to decide who gets to wear the shirt today. Our sensual pleasures have changed quite a bit in 2,600 years, yeah? But it's still the same thing. You know, whether you have one shirt or 100 shirts, siblings still fight over, hey, that's my shirt. No, that's my shirt. I didn't tell you you could wear that. It's like, you got a stain on it. Why were you using bleach? And now my robes are, are the wrong color. You know, it is still, sensual objects have not changed, yeah? Form, feeling, perception, you know, mental fabrications and consciousness, these things have not changed. And so likewise, the technique that we are going to use, it should not change. Any technique that we are applying, and it allows us to do these things, to take something that we can see and see its drawbacks in a balanced way, to the point that our mind kind of lets go, then this is a good meditation technique, yeah? And in those moments where our mind has gotten settled, and we probably get this in almost every meditation sitting, right? We go and we sit down and we settle and we follow our breath and we pay attention to our mind and things settle down. We'll reach a level of calm, right? That we're kind of like, yeah, okay, it seems like I'm not getting more calm. I've kind of reached a nice stable point for this sitting. That's the perfect time to be like, okay, what do I not feel very strongly about? What do I feel like I've got a bit of willingness to address? Yeah. And just look at, how can I become free from this? Yeah. How can I see that this is just one of many? How can I see that this is it can be a source of suffering, or it can just be a form. It can just be a feeling. It can just be a perception. Okay. And I have a funny thought just to close things off. Has anybody seen these? I understand these are very popular on the Discord. These they call them memes. And I'm just the tiniest bit too old to think like this. But if any of you are wondering how people think and talk these days, I think this is how people do it. So if you have any question, if anything I have said has failed to produce a picture in your mind, and they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, then here's your picture, yeah? So disenchantment, we're not like fighting the things that we're trying to keep away. We just don't need it, don't need it, don't need it. But peace, peace, right? Okay, so with that, we are going to continue until 5 p.m. Eastern time. Somebody nod. Okay. And then, yeah, if you're still here, we'll open it up. Anybody has anything that they like to throw out to the group, and questions, answers, just anything that comes up. So again, sitting, walking, looking at the half hours, and okay, enjoy your afternoon.